Hi there. In this lecture, we're going to examine realism and the origins of Impressionism. This second part of our examination of French Realism will explore the artists Manet and Caillebotte. To begin with, let's look at Eugene Delacroix. If you recall his rather spectacular Orientalist fantasy, The Death of Sardanapalus, from 1824, was widely rejected by the Paris elite salons. Just thought it was too much, so much excess. But there was something so wonderfully extravagant, opulent, and energizing about this painting. No one had ever gone so far to explore something. And that's something, there's a group of artists who really admired Delacroix's daring, his willingness to take such bold risks, his willingness to flaunt convention. Later in life, he really doubles down on this energy of this sublime. Here we have a lion hunt and this tangle of horses and men and lions, and the violence of this is just overwhelming the canvas. And this is the thing that people really admired about Delacroix. He was really searching for this seething energy, and he was able to communicate this in his painting in a really vivid way. So when Delacroix dies in 1863, the group of artists that saw him as the luminary of their romantic ideas about art. They had this painting made by Henry Fenton Latour. He's the guy in the white shirt here. And this sort of composes this group of fellow artists. Like, we all belong, we all understand Romanticism, and Delacroix was our hero. And the man we're going to focus on now, his name is in red here, and he's got this shock of red hair. He's right there, right next to Delacroix, Edouard Manet. And Manet is a painter who's just really getting going in this time period, and he really enjoys this company of rebels, these people like James McNeill Whistler, we've talked about him, who are artists who see art as this thing that's really important, and it doesn't have to be about morals or things. It just has to be a great painting, right? They're really into painting, and exciting paintings at that. Manet's early contribution to salons was rejected out of hand. It was a rather peculiar picture of an absinthe drinker, and we see this guy in a cape and this ill-fitting hat, and there this glass of bright green drink and the bottle empty on the ground. This is a very peculiar subject for someone who is trying to gain entry into the salon. Absinthe drinking had begun in 1800 around as a medicine, and then it turned in the 1840s into a popular drink among artists. Bitter, horrible drink with intense amount of alcohol in it. And the wormwood that it was based on would create these hallucinogenic fits. So it was not the kind of thing that people in the conservative salon would take much an interest to. Here is the Green Fairy, as it became known in France. This pale green drink you pour over these spoons with sugar cubes, and the sugar would make this incredible bitter concoction somewhat more palatable. The fashion of absinthe went absolutely haywire in Paris. From 1875 to 1913, there was a 15-fold increase in absinthe drinking in France. Just an incredible popularity. People just wanted this crazy high that it gave. But this painting, as I said, is rather peculiar. Not the least that it's all about absinthe drinking, though we don't see the man actually drinking the absinthe. But he has this ragtag coat. He looks a little bit shabby. Absinthe drinkers were more on the poor set. But what I find so peculiar is the way he's holding his legs, like he's in some kind of ballet formation. It brings to mind the portrait of Louis XIV, who was, as you see, wonderfully adept at ballet dance with those shapely legs. And so what is going on here? Why has he brought this painting into the salon? It doesn't seem to have made any effort in the subject to address the values and ideas that the salon held dear. Well, to be honest, Manet did not go better with his second attempt at entry into the salon. He creates a painting called The Luncheon on the Grass. And it is perhaps even a stranger painting. Not only are there two clothed figure and this nude figure lying in a park, there is this very peculiar fourth figure in the lake behind, a woman bathing in this lake at lunch. And the proportions are wrong. She's too far away to be so large. She creates a very nice triangle composition to their arrangement, but it's really sort of peculiar. Her presence there is not really being addressed or acknowledged or makes any sense compared to this. The guy knows how to paint, but it's just so strange, right? In many ways, what he's doing is, again, he's trying to create this world of paint where paint rules, and it follows the rules of the salon. It's a history painting. It has figures in a landscape with a still life. But it's about what? We're looking modern dressed students arguing philosophy in the park. And then there's this nude woman who's looking right back at us. Like, what are you looking at? Haven't you ever seen a naked woman before? The strangeness of this picture is compounded by the idea that it seems to be based on an engraving by Raphael. Look at the lower right here, this group of river gods in this clearly classical inspired engraving. We have this composition that Manet has drawn from to create his painting. So he seems to be saying, see, I can make a history painting. I know what goes into making a history painting. It's got to be based on the classics, right? Well, here you have all the shape and manner of things that look like a history painting, but none of the actual moral content that one would expect to find in a history painting. And I think that void of moral content is what people found rather offensive. Well, it was rejected from the salon, along with quite a few others. That year saw an incredible purging of artists from the salon. More than 4,000 canvases had been refused, and the painters complained of favoritism. And so under pressure, they decided, okay, if the artists want, we will take all the refused paintings and we'll have a second show. The Salon de Refusés, the people who were not accepted in the salon, and you can judge for yourself whether you think these paintings are worthwhile. And if you can actually look at this cartoon of this, you can actually see Manet's painting there is on the mid-right. We can see one of the students there sort of making his grand gesture. And so all of these paintings were shown, and people went, it was hugely popular because people wanted to see, like, oh, what did they reject? And they would go to the show and they would laugh out loud. They just thought, oh, it's garbage. The salon, they really know what they are doing. These are all terrible paintings. And in this way, but the idea of the refusé, this idea of the people that had been banished, they also got a little bit of street cred from this. There was a sense that they were doing something that was beyond the mainstream. The Academy was very conservative, was very restrictive about what it was looking for, and they were the ones who were willing to buck the trends and try something new, try something different. So there were a lot of critics who came out in favor of these refusés, these people who had been kicked out of the salon. And they were the ones who started to get a bit of a name for themselves because they were somehow willing to try something different. To that point, the following year, this was the painting that won the prize at the Salon as the best painting shown. And truth be told, it's a nice painting. It's very lovely, beautifully painted, but boy, is it conservative. It's exactly what the Salon critics were looking for. Beautiful composition, wonderful treatment of the figure in the landscape, luscious curving shapes, so joyous and beautiful. And at the same time, so completely empty of any real substance. So the critics at this point were looking at the Academy as being kind of out of touch with reality. That same year, Manet comes back and he's got another painting for us to chew on. And this one is a real knockout. And this one is accepted to the Salon, but again, it's so weird. We have our model who is sitting there upright, looking at us straight in the face, and she is looking us down. And she's not just some Venus in repose that we are there to look over. She is dressed like a prostitute. Like, okay, you're the client now. What would you have me do? And so that kind of confrontation, that sort of boldness that he would put someone dressed like a prostitute, propped up like this in this room, all of the accoutrement of this situation suggests that we are somehow now a client of this prostitute, implying that we are somehow culpable in this arrangement. People were shocked by this painting, not only for what it represents, but its style of painting. It was incredibly flat. It had no depth. It looked like she was a playing card. They called her the Queen of Spades after a bath. And that flatness really makes it also very much a painting. Now, again, like Manet's other paintings, there is a precedent for women reclining on beds in paintings of the past. Giorgione, The Sleeping Venus from 1510, Titian, The Venus of Urbino. And again, in both of those earlier compositions, we can see the figure in a passive role, whereas clearly Olympia is looking up, alert, not languidly luxuriating and allowing us to take her in. We are now in this more complicated relationship. And he was talking about the way in which we do engage with women as the subject of paintings. Manet, he gets a little fame. He decides that it's time for him to really go and learn about painting from the masters. He's not going to Rome. Instead, he takes a trip to Spain. In 1865, he arrives in Spain and he searches out Velázquez, tremendous Spanish painter from the 18th century. And he sees Goya. Anyone who is a great painter, who has aspirations to become a great painter, who sees Velázquez, has to come to terms with the fact you will never be as good. You can never match the absolute mastery and tremendous skill and accomplishment of Velázquez. He is really in a class all his own, beyond anyone can achieve today or furthermore. He is that extraordinary and humbling. And so Manet comes back from Spain inspired by what he's seen, but also realizing something very important, which is it's not about mastering the master's work. It's about finding my own thing. What is it that I do? And what is it that I have to give to this? So he comes back and he starts painting even flatter pictures, even more dramatically graphic pictures, with this bold, striking outline and shape and form. This distinctive style that Manet develops becomes known as his facture, which means his making, his personal way of looking at things and painting. He also gets involved, having seen Goya, in political art, and he is starts to make these ginormous paintings on the execution of the Emperor Maximilian. This, of course, was a hugely embarrassing moment for France in its international politics. The Emperor Maximilian was ensconced by Napoleon III. It was part of the Mexican Revolution to overthrow the installed Habsburg government. And so in this, we have this really complicated scene of this dispersonal execution of he's been treated like a common criminal. And the composition is very powerfully reminiscent of the failing of the Spanish resistance to the French under Napoleon. And so we have this extraordinary painting. These were banned. He made these huge paintings. Manet was forbidden to exhibit them anywhere in Paris. And so he has gone to extraordinary lengths to try and create these. And many of them were later dismantled and scrapped. He never found, and no one would buy them. So this was a huge thing he went out on a limb for that never materialized. Manet had close artistic friends. Émile Zola, the writer, thought Manet was the quintessential artist, willing to go out beyond the boundaries of what was known and acceptable, to challenge tastes, to give people things they had never seen before. And as he wrote, "We are not accustomed to seeing such simple and direct translations of reality. Then, as I said, there is such a surprisingly elegant awkwardness. It is a truly charming experience to contemplate this luminous and serious painting which interprets nature with a gentle brutality." There's all kinds of contradictions in the way Zola talks about Manet. And that's true because Manet is full of these contradictions. Now, I want to call your attention to this portrait of Émile Zola by Manet. And you notice how Zola has been inframed by these Japanese artworks. We have on the left something that looks like a rimpa style gold background painting. We have an ukiyo-e print of a kabuki actor. And then we have what looks like a small sketch of Manet's own Olympia. So he sees all of these things in this worldview. Now, we also know that at this time, Zola and other artists were just getting into Japanisme, and this plays a role in the style and effect of Manet's own work. Manet was infatuated by this woman, Berthe Morisot, who he met in 1868. She was the grand niece of Fragonard, the painter of the swing, which we talked about in our very first lecture. And Berthe Morisot was a really accomplished painter. And so she and Manet would talk a great deal, and they inspired each other in their painting. He painted her a great deal. And in this painting, The Balcony, you notice how he's picked up on this composition by Goya, the Mayas at the balcony, this way in which the women are held behind bars. The bars become this barrier, this interior world. The women are watched over, they're framed, they're contained, they're kept at a distance to the world outside. Eventually, even though there seemed to be an awful lot of interest between Manet and Morisot, she marries Manet's brother Eugene in 1874. Here's another portrait of Berthe Morisot by Manet. And her own painting style we will talk about in our next lecture because it really deserves its own time and attention. Here we see a painting from 1873, the railway at Gare Saint-Lazare. And this is Manet. Again, this idea of the bars. Now the bars are on the other side. We're in a public space. And this woman and her charge are outside of the train station. And we've interrupted them. We are walking in a public space, but there's clearly a sense of apprehension. The adult is very keyed in to the possibility of danger. And I think this is a really interesting painting because of this new public space. In 1873, the riots we mentioned in our previous lecture had just finished, and there was a foreboding and lingering fear in the atmosphere of Paris. And Manet's trying to capture that feeling of dis-ease, that everything's calm but not. One of Manet's last great paintings is called In the Conservatory, 1878. And in it, he shows, again, this woman and this man who are the models were good friends of his who owned a clothing shop. And Manet was really keyed into fashion. He wanted to show people dressed in the elegant clothes of the day, and he shows them in this interior space, the conservatory, but it's also a jungle, so it's interior and exterior. Again, the contradictions that Manet likes to play upon. This amazing composition, the intimacy of these two people, the way their hands are just barely touching. She is listening to what he is saying, and yet there isn't an intensity, there's a casualness, but there's also a sense of formality, this sense of distance. They're not that intimate. They can't be. So there's this tension in this painting. It's just so beautiful the way the plants frame this couple, the way the bench separates her from him, like the balcony earlier. And many of the paintings feel like this is Manet negotiating his relationship with Berthe Morisot. This is a much more conservative style than the earlier combative work where he's really in your face, making you think. And it's at this time that Manet was trying to really seriously improve his reputation. He wanted to join the Salon. He wanted to be accepted in the Academy. Here's another tremendous painting by Manet, A Bar at the Foire Berger, 1882. And in this painting, we see the barmaid behind, again, a barrier between us and her. And we see her with the wares that she is preparing for the guests at this place. And she's looking not directly at us. There's not that confrontation. But she's also there as a part of the wares of this. The women who worked as waitresses were often engaged in these other occupations outside of their job to make ends meet. And so if we look behind her, there is a reflection. A mirror is directly behind her. And so we see what she has in front of her behind her. So we see off to the side there, that's her back. And that there is this man there on the far right corner, cut off. That's the guy who is really in our place talking to her. And so he's giving us this sort of a sense that she's not alone. And that look she's giving is her considering what this man is proposing. This is a wonderfully incredible painting with lovely, exquisite details. I love the fact that in the far upper left, there are a pair of green shoes, and that is the acrobat doing a performance on this occasion. Now, Manet would die from syphilis and complications there, and rheumatism, which he contracted in his 40s. It caused him considerable pain and partial paralysis. In the years prior to his death, his left foot was amputated because of gangrene, and he died shortly thereafter. Now I want to talk about one of the tremendous artists who is part of this new movement. We'll talk later about the Impressionists. He was really a realist. He was really a tremendous painter. He came from a very wealthy family, and so he didn't have the same pressures as many of them did to make a painting that would sell or find a way to an audience that would buy his work. But Gustave Caillebotte was a tremendous painter. I will never forget going into the Musée d'Orsay and seeing this painting. This reproduction just does not do it justice. The color is absolutely stunning. The luminous reflection off the floor, these sweaty men in their backs breaking labor, scraping the floor, the shavings all across, the gestures, and then this way it's framed. Everything about this painting was just perfect. It was not a brushstroke out of place. He was a consummate painter. And of course, I understand if you're not in Paris, you might find it difficult to see this picture, but that's no excuse for not going to Chicago and seeing his other tremendous masterwork, The Paris Street on a Rainy Day. This is at the Art Institute of Chicago. It so captures this moment in 1877. We see the Haussmannization of Paris, these big, bold, receding lines, the cobblestones, the wide avenues, the street lights. All of this was a part of this new Paris program. People were going out and walking, and as entertainment, they were going for a walk. They were just seeing the sights. You could do that now. It was safe. The sidewalks were wide and clean. There was a new joy people found in walking the streets of Paris. And so there was a name for these ambulatory artists who enjoyed to wander with no purpose. They were known as the flâneurs. And this name was originally coined way back in 1842 by Paul Garvani in his book Le Flâneur. The flâneur is a person who has no particular goal in mind, is a bit of a gawker, will stop and stare at whatever catches their attention, but they're there just as a witness. They're not there to take it in or draw it or bring it back and make money off it. It's there just to experience. And for them, this is what the ultimate goal in life is to experience the world of the city. Here in another wonderful painting by Gustave Caillebotte, we see Le Pont de l'Europe in 1876. We have a couple walking toward us. We have this dog possibly barking, man looking off the bridge. It's such a ordinary scene and so masterfully painted. Look at the structure of that bridge. There's a wonderful freshness to the way the light falls, the smoke in the background. Again, those broad, long Haussmann roads vanishing off into the distance. And this is the new Paris. This is the new fashions. These are what people are doing today. And it was suddenly okay to look at what was happening today, to investigate what does it mean to be who we are at this time in this place, and the way we look at things and the way we interact with things. There is a sense of danger with the dog and the shadow. There's a sense of we're still figuring things out. It's not all clear what we're supposed to be doing, but there is a sense of newness and new horizons that are being explored.